It's Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. Hello everyone, Killershrewfan here, and let me be the first to say Merry Christmas. I hope you all have gotten your dinosaur fixes on this happiest of holidays, but if not, do not worry. I am here with a review to give you your dinosaur fix on this, the last day of Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. The time has finally come to take a look at the new, for 2019, Papo limited edition Spinosaurus. Now, this was easily one of the most anticipated models of the year, and now that it is finally out, people have been reviewing it left and right, some singing just unbridled praises for it, others finding all sorts of issues with it, and now it is my turn. I wanted to save this for my last day of this year's 12 Days of Reviews. I thought it would be a great note to go out on, and I am very excited to take a look and weigh in on this limited edition Spinosaurus. Now, I already did an unboxing video back when I got this thing. Link will be in the description. We took a look at the box art there. Admittedly, for a limited edition offering, the box was a bit underwhelming, a bit basic, so that's something that was a bit of a disappointment. But now that I've had time to sit on this model for a little bit, how does it hold up? Has the honeymoon phase ended, and am I seeing some of those issues that others have been calling out? Or am I still in love with this Papo Spinosaurus? We're going to find out right here and right now on Killershrewfan Killer Toy Reviews. And I just gotta say, I can't keep it in. I still absolutely love this model. Sure, there are issues with it, especially for the price point and the whole limited edition nature of the piece, but you know, what model doesn't have problems? I do think this is just an absolutely fantastic addition to the Papo lineup, a welcome update to a much beloved species, and easily one of the best dinosaur models that I added to my collection this year, and I am so excited to take a look at it. So we're going to do that right now, starting off as we always do, at the head. So taking a look at the head of the Spinosaurus, as you can see, Papo hit their usual notes in terms of the sculptural detail. It's all very intricate and finely done, right down to the minuscule pits, sensory pits that have been carved into the crocodilian-style scales of this Spinosaurus. And that's just a microscopic, not microscopic, but very small level of detail that Papo is working with, and I applaud them for going that far with the sculpture. The teeth have all been individually sculpted, and as with many of Papo's theropods, this Spinosaurus does come with an articulated jaw that opens nice and wide. I was actually a bit surprised at how wide this mouth opened. Unfortunately, with the open mouth, you can see that the top part of the cheek was not painted the same color as the lower part, and it's not like egregiously distracting or anything, but it's one of those things where it's like, this is a limited edition $60 figure. Why could you not paint the upper part as well? It feels like an oversight more than a planned element of this Spinosaurus, which is a bit unfortunate. But aside from the cheeks, I think the mouth, for the most part, is quite well handled in terms of the articulated jaw. I'm a really big fan of how far back Papo sculpted the throat and how it actually looks like a functioning gullet when you look at it from the front. I know it's a bit dark in there, but you can see like the whole situation is there. The tongue has also been sculpted with some ridges, which is new. I've never seen that on a dinosaur model before, so I applaud Papo for doing something new and different. And the whole thing has a gloss to give it a slobbery look. The roof of the mouth has been addressed, if only in the slightest. But yeah, the mouth does have this very wet, lived-in feel. It feels like this thing is salivating, which is really, really cool, and I applaud Papo for always bringing that level of realism to their dinosaur model. The teeth kind of bug me. I know I said they're individually sculpted, and they are individually painted, but there's something about them that feels sloppy. Like the paint kind of slops up onto the scales in some places, or doesn't go far enough. The color is a bit too bright, it doesn't feel weathered or lived in, and there's something about it that makes it feel like they're sculpted on top of this thing rather than growing out of the animal. There's no shading to kind of separate the teeth from the scales. It's just a difference in color that they rely on. Again, the cheek flap on this side, also not painted. So the teeth and the cheeks are a bit of an enigma to me. To Papo's credit, it does look good when the mouth is closed, and the sculptural details here are very nice. The eye looks fantastic. They've got the nasal crest, the nostrils are properly positioned. The macro sculpted sensory pits on the front of this thing feel so incredibly lifelike and crocodilian, and it does look very intimidating from the front. It's just a few things that just kind of baffle me, like, why didn't you push this a little bit further or handle this a little bit better? Going down the length of the body, there's a ton of sculptural details. Wrinkles, folds of skin in the throat, crocodilian scoots that begin at the back of the neck and then kind of split off into a triple line at the shoulders and then run all the way down to the tail. The shoulder muscle looks incredibly powerful. The thighs, nice and strong. There's a lovely wrinkle kind of framing the gut. Here you have got unfortunate seam lines, like two very big seam lines, one at the tail, one at the leg. And it's like, Papo couldn't find a way to disguise those. They usually do a very good job. But here on this limited edition model, they didn't. They're very standout, which is unfortunate. And as you can see, the tail has this sort of eel-like quality to it, and something that I found was interesting was that it has a sort of softer plastic, almost rubber feel to it, which is very distinct for this model. I know a few of Papo models have stuff like this, but usually their larger ones like this do not. So I was a bit surprised by that. And for what it's worth, it does look okay on this model. I know it's a very, very, big leap to make to give this thing an eel-like tail, but it fits the aesthetics and it's very well sculpted. So I think Papo at least saw this thing through to the end and made sure it actually worked aesthetically with the rest of the model. Anywho, the detailing on this side, same story with the triple row of scoots that run down to the about 3/4 of the way down the tail. You get back to the midsection, and again you have that garish seam line, and the seam line is also on the thigh here. I like the way that the rib cage is kind of exposed here, like it's kind of being buckled in over as the creature kind of has this S curve to it. That feels very natural. Shoulder area, very powerful looking, and again we come back up to that Spinosaurus head. Taking a look at the arms of this Spinosaurus, they look incredibly powerful, and I'm a big fan of the sort of ridge scaling going on over the elbows. The plate scaling on the back of the fingers looks quite nice, and the musculature in the tricep, bicep, and shoulder region also is very well handled. You have got seams here, but I can forgive these because they are a little bit disguised by the way the skin is buckling and moving with the posture of this Spinosaurus. Other hand, same story in terms of the sculptural detail with the plate scaling on the back of the hand, the ridge scaling at the elbows, lovely musculatures, folds of skin, very powerful looking shoulder blade, and buckling skin at the midsection. As you can see here on this side, the skin is stretched tight over the rib cage and it feels very, very organic. The palms have been lovingly sculpted with all of the wrinkles and folds of skin, and then there is the sort of minuscule scaling going on covering that area. The claws have a texture to them, but they're done in this just jet black coloration, which does not highlight the sculptural details of these weapons at all, which is a bit unfortunate. Papo does a good job making sure their claws have a texture and weathering to them, but here, for whatever reason, they shirked that. Taking a look at the feet and legs of this model, I'm a big fan of this back foot that's bracing against the ground with the toes splaying out, distributing the weight. It feels like this thing has a power and a weight to it because of the positioning of those toes. And the musculature in the calf and thigh looks very powerful. The back right foot is curled up as this thing takes a step forward or paddles forward. And again, you have lovely plate scaling going on the back of the toes. Lovely musculature in the calves, and the thigh looks incredibly powerful here as well. And again, unfortunately, you have got the seam line. It feels like we're missing some wrinklage in this area around the legs as they move, but I guess I can forgive it because this thing is in such a extreme motion. The underside features lovely wrinkles and folds of skin in the gullet region all the way down to the pectorals, which look very well handled and powerful. The diaphragm of the Spinosaurus is addressed, and you've got this different stylization and scalings down here with more rectangular shapes kind of ridging out from these larger scales at the midsection. And again, you've got lovely folds of skin as the creature kind of moves in this sort of S curve fashion, and the sculptural details continue all the way down to the eel-like tail. Real quick, I want to show you the top of this Spinosaurus, and as you can see, it does have this very graceful, like, bend and flow to it, like this thing is kind of undulating forward, and it looks really cool, and the way that everything is moving feels like it fits for this position. Nothing feels like it's buckling the wrong way or stretching the wrong way. Papo made sure that the elements all worked under this sort of S posture, and I applaud them for it. Speaking of the posture, this is a big area of contention for a lot of people because yes, this Spinosaurus is in a knuckle walking position. Me personally, I can forgive Papo on that for two reasons. First of all, Spinosaurus is just impossible. It is just impossible to understand. It feels like every time a scientific paper comes out saying it was one way, another one comes out saying it was a different way and debunking the previous offering. So for a while, yes, we thought it walked on its knuckles. Now, not so much. But these things take a while to make, so I can forgive Papo for kind of not being able to change this after a certain point. I don't know when it was debunked or anything, and I don't know how long they were working on it, but it might have been far enough in that they couldn't go back to the drawing board and change it. Another reason I can forgive the posture on this Spinosaurus is that the box indicates it is in a swimming, hunting position. So what that means is, obviously with the undulating sail and everything, it feels like this thing is kind of moving off into the water, propelling off the ground with that back left foot bracing it against the muddy lake bottom, while the back right leg paddles forward, and then the hands are held up and at the ready, kind of pushing it, not pushing it, but like it's just kind of has them curled up as it undulates through the water. Obviously we have it in a terrestrial pose here, and it's going to look like it's on a terrestrial position, but Papo kind of explained their thought process to this pose on the box. And if you don't have the box, I know you don't get that, but for me, I forgive it. It's like, okay, you covered your ass with the box. I will allow this knuckle walking Spinosaurus. So the positioning works for me, and like I said, the way that everything flows from it, the movement of the skin, the shape overall, I do love it. I really do love the pose on this Spinosaurus. I will say from the front position, I'm not a huge fan of it. It kind of has this sort of, ooh, come at me, bro, type look to it, and that doesn't really work for me. Like, I can justify it in profile, not so much from the front. It looks a bit awkward from the front, even with the intimidating nature of that head. The paint scheme is also another issue with a lot of people. Yes, it does not look as good as the promo images, but it never does. It never looks as good because these are hand-painted, mass-produced items. They have to make them simplified for the consumers if they are going to get them all made. And for what it is, I think the colors are very well applied, and there's a lot of colors. Papo usually uses very basic colors to get an idea across. This one has a lot. As you can see, you've got different shades of cream for the underbelly that come up into this sort of rustic brown coloration that breaks that up and gives it a patterning. And then you've got this sort of dark forest teal dorsal coloration that kind of goes down from the back of the skull all the way to the tip of the tail, with orange scoots at the back of the neck, and then this lovely gradiating orange color on the tail as well. There's a lot of coloration going on here, and the patterning is fantastic. The one area where it doesn't really work for me is on the sail, and I know what they were going for here, and it's pretty well done, but the chalk-like lines that kind of are just down towards the torso do not work for me. Those feel very painted on and very lazy. But I do like the paint on this Spinosaurus. It augments the model that's already there. I don't think it's perfect or anything, but it does do its job in that it highlights some of the sculptural details that are already there, and it's interesting. It's visually interesting to look at. I will agree that they could have done more, and I don't think they had to necessarily do all that much. All they had to do was a wash, another dark wash to really make all the scale texturings pop, and then maybe just a dry brushing to really kind of show the highlights of the sculptural areas. Like, this is sufficient for Papo's standard paint schemes. In fact, it's more than sufficient. I would say this looks more appealing than any of the paint schemes we've gotten from Papo in recent memory. But for a limited edition model, I do agree that there was room to do just a little bit more, if only in the slightest. And really, if you're handy with a brush, then I do think you can really, the base is there. You can really make this thing sing. All you have to do, like I said, is really bring out all the sculptural details with a wash and then do a dry brush to bring out the high points. And I mean, in this lighting, from this distance, the detail still pops, but I just think those two elements would have broken things up a little bit more, really made it a standout. But for what it is that we got, it looks good. And hey, it looks a lot better than the promo images that were sent to Happy Hen Toys. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous after seeing those. I will say my biggest area of contention with the paint is on the head. You already heard me talk about how the teeth feel a little too bright white and don't feel like there's any shading to make them feel like they're growing out of the animal. But beyond that, the paint scheme on the head, kind of highlights the shrink wrapping, if you ask me. I mean, the shrink wrapping on this thing isn't bad. I mean, it's not as bad as some of Papo's previous offerings. It's there, but it's not abysmal. But then this paint scheme kind of augments it and makes it look worse than it actually is. Another issue is the fact that it feels very painted on. I would have liked a little bit more gradation going on this head with the patterning, so that dark brown could have dissipated just a little bit smoother. But yeah, that's just something that I think could have been better handled with this paint scheme. Now, as far as the size on this Papo Spinosaurus goes, it's absolutely enormous. I was a bit shocked, if I'm being completely honest. In fact, this thing, if we bring in our trusty dusty tape measure, comes in at a whopping 15 inches from the tip of the tail to the tip of the snout. I'm sorry, it's a bit blown out. I can't really read the centimeters on that length, but yeah, this is one of Papo's largest. In fact, coming from the base all the way to the highest point, you're looking at just about, I want to say, just under 7 inches, about 6.5 inches off the ground. So that is an absolutely massive sculpt on this thing. For size comparison, we're going to go ahead and bring in the also new for 2019, recently reviewed Papo Pentaceratops. And as you can see, this thing is dwarfed by this Papo Spinosaurus. Even in the rearing position, it only comes up ever so slightly above the sail of the Spinosaurus. And in the downward position, it's not a contest. The Spinosaurus dwarfs it in length and in height. And this Papo Pentaceratops is no pushover in terms of its size. It's the second biggest ceratopsian that Papo ever gave us. So if you have this, hopefully this gives you some idea of the size that you can expect from this Spinosaurus. And this also highlights the difference in painting styles. I will say the Spinosaurus paint job is much better applied than the Pentaceratops. Next up for size comparison, here is the Papo Spinosaurus next to the new for 2019 Papo Gorgosaurus, and this tiny little model is absolutely dwarfed by this Spinosaurus. The whole thing could almost fit in the head of this Spinosaurus. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I'm saying. It's very small, and again, the paint scheme is just so much better on this Spinosaurus. Next up from Papo for comparisons, here it is next to the Papo Brachiosaurus, the largest Papo model to date. And as you can see, the Spinosaurus, yeah, it's dwarfed by it, but it sizes up pretty well, not in terms of like scale and everything, but if I put this thing on its tail, you can see it's even higher off the ground than that Brachiosaurus, and that is just insane because that Brachiosaurus is huge. Sure, it's no contest in terms of the height when it's in its actual proper positioning, but they're about equal in terms of the length overall. Of course, if you stretch the Brach's neck out, probably not, but still. And next up for size comparison, here it is next to the Papo Baryonyx, the other Spinosaurid that Papo has to offer, and as you can see, these two are quite similar in terms of their overall size. The Baryonyx comes up a little bit higher when it's in its reared back position, but if you stand it on its feet, it's a bit more in line with the actual Spinosaurus. I also wanted to go ahead and bring out this Papo Baryonyx because it highlights a certain element of what I was talking about with the dry brushing over the scales on the face of this Baryonyx. I just feel like the detail pops better on this Baryonyx. An older model, not limited edition, but you can see these two side by side. The paint schemes, they highlight the detail much better on the Baryonyx, and it's just a simple matter of a dry brush. That's all it needed, and for whatever reason, Papo didn't do it. Next up for size comparison, here it is next to the Papo Spinosaurus, and as you can see, this older model from Papo, this massive Spinosaurus, doesn't even come up higher than the Papo Spinosaurus. I'm giving the sale edge to the new version, of course, but yeah, I mean, this Papo Spinosaurus, this new one, is just massive, and a huge step in the right direction for the company, both in terms of visual appeal and scientific accuracy. No, it's not perfect, but it shows that they are trying, and I applaud them for that. Next up for size comparison, the one we always have to do, it is the Papo Spinosaurus next to the Papo running Tyrannosaurus Rex, and I do think these two size up quite well next to each other. The Papo Spinosaurus might be a little bit too bulky, but in terms of like the overall height, the length, it's kind of, well, maybe not the height, but the length is certainly working for me. These two do feel like they size up pretty well in that department. The Spinosaurus is rightfully longer than the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and just for like visual interest, obviously Papo, their scientific accuracy is a bit iffy, but just looking at these two side by side, they look like they came from the same world. Like if these were characters or dinosaurs in a movie, I can see them being in the same movie. And I think it's really cool that they have that sort of display compatibility element to them. So bravo on that, Papo. And for what I promised to be the final size comparison, here it is next to the recently reviewed, also new for 2019, Safari Limited Spinosaurus. And yeah, there's no contest between these two at all. Wow. Oh man. I mean, I was never a big fan of this Safari Limited Spinosaurus, but seeing it next to this Papo one, oh, it hurts. It actually hurts to look at these two side by side. No, the Papo one is not perfect by any means, but wow. Seeing comparing it to the Safari Limited one, it makes Safari look like some kid sculpted that thing out of Play-Doh and then brought it home to show its parents. Papo just blows this out of the water in every conceivable way. So there you have it, guys. That is going to do it for our look at the new, for 2019, Papo Limited Edition Spinosaurus. Is it the perfect Spinosaurus? No. Is it a fantastic model? Yes. But here's the kicker. I do not think this thing is worthy of being limited edition, super pricey from Papo. Because, yes, everything about it is fantastic. But I don't think it's any more fantastic than the standard Papo fare in terms of its overall quality. It doesn't feel like they pushed much further with this model than they do with, their standard line. And because of that, I'm just a little perplexed as to why this thing is considered like so much more valuable, so much more special, all that stuff. Like, yeah, obviously it's massive. Its paint scheme might be a little bit more intricate, but by and large, I don't see this thing as being anything like super incredible when compared to some of Papo's other offerings, because everything Papo does is pretty top notch. So this Spinosaurus just feels like a standard Papo model, and because of that, I have a hard time recommending it, especially at that price point. I'm almost tempted to say, maybe hold out if you don't have the money, wait for Reborn, and then maybe Papo will come back with this thing as a repaint, and then you can get it then, possibly for cheaper, given the lack of limited edition nature. Even the box that they threw in, when compared to some of the things like PNSO, feels cheap, feels underdone. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I like it a lot. I'm glad to have it. but it doesn't feel like it earned the status of limited edition. And because of that, I'm going to give this model an 8 out of 10, but not really recommend it, especially to the casual collector who might not be able to blow such a large amount of money on only one model. So as always, I want to know what you guys think of this Spinosaurus. Do you own it yet? Are you planning to pick it up? What was your favorite Spinosaurus from 2019? Drop all of your comments down below, and as always, if you enjoyed our review today, do not be afraid to let us know by hitting that like button, and don't forget to subscribe on the way out. And with that, Killer Shrew Fan's 12 days of reviews comes to an end for the 3rd year. Guys, thank you so much to everyone who's been watching from the start and everyone who joined me along the way. The greatest gift I could ever receive is your support, and I just love doing this. I love, sparking conversations, sharing my thoughts on something I'm very passionate about. And these 12 days of reviews, they're a lot of work, but boy, they're fun to do. I mean, I'm looking forward to a break from reviews for a while now, but thank you, I want to say from the bottom of my heart. I really hope that these reviews these past few days were inspirational, eye-opening, or at least interesting and worth watching. So thank you all, and from my family to yours, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. This is Killer Shrew Fan, signing out. Bye-bye.